Have you ever been killed by a guy you could barely even see? You shouldn't blame your teammates, but you might have to blame your settings for that. What's up, ProGuides family? My name is Nathan Ng, and today we'll be looking at visibility, more specifically, what settings you can do to boost your performance and make your game look so much better. So hit that sub button and let's jump right into it. Let's begin by looking at the in-game settings, as those are the same for everybody. Of course, since we're looking at visibility, we have to look at the video settings. Firstly, for color mode, you have two options, TV and computer monitor. I personally have it on computer monitor, and I recommend you do the same. But if you do select TV, you'll have higher brightness than the maximum that you normally have in the options. And again, I'm not a fan of it, but it is extra brightness. Some people like it and some people hate it. Experiment with it yourself and see what you like. For the brightness setting itself, of course you want to have it as a personal preference, but if you want to be able to spot people in darker areas of the map, it's a pretty good idea to have it turned on. So it's what I would recommend as well. I know not only me, but also some pros have the setting maxed out, and generally I recommend you do the same thing. When it comes to global shadow quality, the best setting is honestly just to max it out as well, at least if your PC can handle it. The reason for this is because it draws out shadows from the largest distance possible. If you use the lower setting for this option, not only will there be fewer details with fewer objects or shadows, it will also cease to render player shadows at longer distances. Meaning that for angles at longer distances, think for example mid doors to double doors on B site on Dust 2, it can really make a difference. If you have high shadow settings, you can easily see the shadow of anyone trying to walk into the mid door all the way from B site. But if you have it set to low or very low, you have to walk halfway into mid to be able to see the shadows of any players walking in. So the simple answer for shadow quality, set it to as high as your PC can handle. Moving on to model and texture detail, it doesn't really matter for visibility at all, and it only makes your game look nicer. Models are more detailed and textures look better, but that's it. There's no competitive advantage, and it only costs you FPS, so not really worth turning on. Shader and effect detail is a different story though. For visibility, both of these settings should definitely be put to their highest values possible. So effect on high and shaders on very high. What this does is make smokes and molotovs a lot more clear and easier to see through. If you throw a molotov and stand right behind it on low settings, you'll clearly see lots of molly smoke, and it's very difficult to spot an opponent behind it. If you set it on high and very high though, it instantly becomes much more see-through, and it's actually viable to take a fight against people behind molotovs. I actually like to take this a step further. I made sure to set these settings to their highest values and abuse the molly smoke as much as I can. Basically, I found a way to use Molotov as a short but very mobile one-way smoke that can be thrown on a fly pretty much anywhere, with lots of success. I use it for example to push Ivy on train, where I throw my Molotov as I'm running up to the Ivy hallway to allow me to peek anyone waiting behind it. The further they are away from it, the bigger advantage I get. And if my opponent doesn't have these settings, it's pretty much a free kill every single game. Ivy on train is not the only spot where this can be abused though. Other examples of this could be lower ramp on the same map, or also pushing ramp on A site Mirage as CT. It can even be used at Monster on Overpass. Basically, there's a ton of good spots where you can put this mechanic to good use to be able to get free kills and win plenty of duels without effort. All you have to do is get creative and experiment. Or alternatively, if you want a shortcut and just get to know all these spots instantly, you can go ahead and visit our website ProGuides.com and go over it with the coach, together with any questions that you might have. Anyway, moving on to the next settings, boost player contrast. Boost player contrast should be on by default, and it should be kept that way. If you for any reason have it turned off, make sure you enable it again. It significantly helps you with visibility, and there's absolutely no reason to have it turned off. Basically what the setting does is exactly as the name would suggest. It boosts the player's contrast compared to the background, making player models stand out more, and therefore making them a lot easier to spot. The final video setting here that's really going to change your visibility though is FXAA anti-aliasing. By default, it's set to be on, and it's probably one of the worst things to have. All it does is blur your game with no upsides at all. It's a very old method of anti-aliasing back when computers couldn't really handle it properly, and therefore it doesn't only look poor, but it also costs performance and makes everything less visible. So what to do with the setting is pretty straightforward. Just turn it off. That leaves us with one more visibility setting that is quite important, and that is resolution and aspect ratio. Of course, for the best clarity, the higher resolution the better, but you still have the question of aspect ratio. Should you play on 4:3, 16:9, or maybe 16:10? Well, honestly, it's personal preference, but I think undoubtedly it's easier to spot people on the aspect ratio of 4:3 stretched, just because the models are larger, but at the same time, when you turn on 16:9, you might see opponents on the side of your screen that wouldn't have been spotted if you're using 4:3. So which res has better visibility? Well, I don't know. You tell me. I personally use both with success, and I no longer have a preference. Currently, I'm playing with 16:9, and I've been using it for quite a while. Mostly that has to do with the fact that recently I started playing other games with no options of playing 4:3, so I might as well play it across all games. At the end of the day, it's just what you prefer though, so I advise to experiment and see what you end up sticking with. Honestly, there's no right or wrong here, but just really comes down to preference. So give them both a try and let me know what you think. Before we continue though, we gotta go over our question of the day. Today's question being, what is your favorite way to practice? Do you prefer bots or real players? Personally, I really love FFA Deathmatch, as playing against bots gets quite boring for me pretty fast. But I also know there's a lot of people out there that really hate the randomness of it. Are you a fellow deathmatch lover, or are you just more about bots? What's your favorite way to practice? Make sure to let us know in the comments down below. That brings us to our second segment, settings outside of the game. The first thing that you should be thinking about is your graphic card settings. By far the most important setting here in order to make the game a lot more visible is digital vibrance. And in order to change it, the process is fairly straightforward. Just go to your desktop and right-click your mouse on an empty spot, then click Nvidia control panel and find adjust desktop color settings. In there, you'll find digital vibrance among some other graphic settings. And in case you're wondering, digital vibrance is a setting that almost every pro has changed unanimously, and it really helps making the game more fun to look at by strengthening the colors. By default, digital vibrance is set to 50%, but by upping it to 75 or maybe even 100, you'll instantly see that the colors are much more intense. This means that both colors are more joyful and the game looks less bland, but it'll also mean that it'll be significantly easier to spot players in certain spots. Darker spots will be brighter and clearer spots will become, well, clearer. It's a setting that almost every pro is using, and you probably should too. If you're one of those people on the AMD graphics card, you have to do something similar there. So to enable that, just go to your AMD Radeon software. Go under the gaming tab, find Counter-Strike, scroll down and turn on the custom color on the right side. Here you can play around with both the contrast and saturation settings and you should get a similar effect. It's not as easy or straightforward as Nvidia's digital vibrance, but it should do the trick. Aside from just digital vibrance though, there's also a few more things that you could do to affect your visibility in quite a big way. Personally, I haven't really touched the other brightness, contrast, or gamma settings, but just because I haven't doesn't mean that you should let that stop you from experimenting yourself. Maybe you'll find something that you'll really like and it might just make you that much of a better player. There is actually another thing when it comes to Nvidia settings, but I won't get into it too much, and it's called Nvidia Freestyle, and it's basically really heavy game filters that can give you significant advantages in quite a few scenarios. For example, when it comes to smokes and mollies. If you really want to know about it, you can always Google it and find what settings are best, but we won't promote it. It is considered to be cheating by a lot of people as it gives you a really big and honestly just an unfair advantage. Perhaps if you're still interested, I should also say that although it can give you an advantage, it does mean that your game will be looking really bad. The colors won't look anything like they should, and the game will be absolutely hideous. Nonetheless, there are people out there that just use a setting and gain quite an advantage from it. Personally, I wouldn't use it, but you know, it's out there. What you definitely should take a look at though is your monitor settings. Monitors are very important when it comes to getting the best Counter-Strike experience possible. 144Hz is just so much better than 60Hz, and 240Hz is also a very noticeable difference from 144. That's not all when it comes to monitors though. The monitor that I have and the one that's by far the most used in CSGO pro scene is a BenQ Zowie XL2546. That's because it has both the 240Hz refresh rate but also great customizability in the settings. It also has this thing called the diac, which significantly increases visual clarity in the most hectic moments. If you're looking for an upgrade, maybe this is the one, but you know, this is non-sponsored, right? When it comes to settings, there's a few things that you should look at, and it also applies to different brands. For diac, which is a Zowie exclusive, it's a premium setting that can be turned on to provide the most clarity. Black equalizer should also be at 10, or at least that's what I'd recommend. It's what Simple uses for example, and it's great to clear out any dark corners without taking the setting too far. For color vibrance, Simple and I have it set at 15. Just for the extra vibrance and mostly the clarity. It just makes it easier to spot opponents. It's very similar to the digital vibrance in the Nvidia settings. Also, make sure that instant mode is turned on, just so that there is as little input lag as possible. In the picture setting, make sure that the brightness is maxed out at 100, contrast is set to 60, and sharpness should be at 7. The rest of the settings should be left at default and you're good to go. Of course, you're always free to experiment on your own, but by using these settings, you can be sure that yours are the same as the pros and thus they're not to blame. I hope all of these settings will help you perform in your ranked games and get some extra frags. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you show us some love by leaving a like and subscribing. And if you want to know more tips, make sure you visit our website, ProGuides.com, and even check out the Simple Master Course or even get one-on-one coaching. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. My name has been Nathan Ng. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.